Hey, listen, group, we're in for a great treat today with all of our speakers. I know you're going to walk away with tons of tactics and strategies that you can implement even this afternoon after the program. Hey, quick shout out to all the Sandler clients out there. Thanks for all your support and trust and helping us grow your business. So what am I going to do? I'm going to share with you some of the trends that we're seeing. And as Carrie said, there's a huge transformation going out there. And I want to share some of the trends that we're seeing. And we're gathering them through really our interaction with 50,000 clients a year go through our program. So we're dealing with CEOs, entrepreneurs, leaders, sales managers, salespeople, anyone that touches revenue, right? Because that salesperson, there's a ton of people who support the revenue generating machines in your organization. So we deal with a lot of those, obviously. And because we have 50,000 people coming through each and every year, we see trends. So we see organizations that have long selling cycles, short selling cycles, transactional, consultative, right? Very complex. There's a lot of different variations. So we see what's working and we see what's not working a lot of times as well. So I want to take some of the trends that we're seeing, tie it into some of the sales motions that I believe we should be doing moving forward, which encompasses more and more team selling that we've ever done in the past. So that's where we're going to head today. Before I jump in, though, thoughts and prayers to all of those who have been affected by the recent hurricanes. I know the Carolinas and Florida, bad news, devastated. Certainly, I can talk to you firsthand about that. But we all have another one coming here this week, which will even be bigger. So again, thoughts and prayers to all those who are affected or about to be affected by those storms. So what's happening in the marketplace challenge-wise? Well, on your screen, you see some challenges. I think all of us can pick and choose the ones that apply to us. I'm going to talk, listen, we all have supply chain issues. I don't think that's kind of disappeared since 2020 for sure. But the ones that I want to talk about today that affect this buying motion, which therefore affects our selling motion, one of the ones that I want to pick out is the cost of money, right? Because when interest rates go up, money's more expensive. And therefore, executives and everyone, we kind of slow down our decision-making process. So when interest rates are up, money's more expensive, decisions tend to slow down. That's a big issue. What else happens? Well, because money is tight, organizations are now saying, hey, let's make a single decision for the enterprise on what's the best partner moving forward. Like even in my world, we would sell training and consulting to different groups within the organization, but the mothership didn't really dictate that, right? So we would hopefully do an awesome job. And then through our land and expand process, we would do business with other parts of the organization, much like you, right? You could sell a software piece of package here, and then hopefully they would say good things in your other parts of the organization. Well, what's happening now is organizations are saying, let's leverage our investment. You can't just spend money over here and we're duplicating it over there with a different vendor, different partner. We're going to pick one or two partners for the whole organization that will solve our needs. Now, think about that for a second. The ripple effect of that is huge for sales organizations because now you've got a lot of different buyers, a lot of different personas with different expertise, different pain points, trying to decide internally what's the best path forward. So, big challenge. Here's another thing that happens. Remote. So we know the world has changed. And because of that, it's harder to engage buyers. We know that from a selling perspective, right? It's hard to find them. It's hard to engage them. It's easier to get ghosted these days than ever before. But putting that aside for a second, because that's a different program, the remote issue that has to do with here is there's easier for people to get involved in that decision process, right? Because think about it. If you were involved in a committee type issue where you were part of the decision-making process and you were not at home office, you would have to fly to home office. Let's count that as a day. You'd sit through 2 days of dog and pony shows, right? Picking the best partner possible. And then you'd fly back. So you're 3 or 4 days out of the office. Now I just go and turn on my Zoom. 45 minutes later, I'm in the motion. I'm in the decision process. I'm hearing everything. So you got a lot of players that are involved now because of this. Let's pick a single horse, right? Universal, enterprise-wide decisions. And it's easier for everybody to participate. So those are the things that I'm going to leverage because buyers themselves are saying it's getting complicated. It's getting complicated. It's getting complicated for the very reasons I just shared with you. Lots of people with different agendas involved in the buying process. Technology has made it even more complicated because everybody's now researching online, trying to figure out what's what. Listen, I've got 5 kids, right? And they Google everything. Honest to goodness, I think they have PhDs in Google University. That's how bad it is, because every time there's a cough, oh my gosh, I think that's a reoccurring thing that came out. So they've got all these things, or even they ask my opinion as a dad. So, hey, Dad, what do you think we should do in here? I've done that 100 times. Do this. Google. No, Google says I shouldn't be doing it that way. I should do it this way. I'm gonna like, what? But that's just the way it is. So technology has accelerated tons of stuff for the buyers, but also the sellers as well. So it's becoming complex. One of the ways that it becomes very complex is exactly what I said. This is a picture of all the potential decision points in an organization. Now it's overwhelming. It looks like a big bowl of spaghetti, really. And so what do we do with this? Now you can look at this and say, well, I don't really deal with that group. Hey, but what I sell doesn't really do over here. Maybe that's true, but I'm just telling you, there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that you may not be aware of. And we can argue the studies that are out there, whether it's HubSpot or Salesforce or Forrester or Gartner, but they're ranging anywhere from, hey, there's 6 to 8 on the low end people involved, all the way up to there's 19 people involved in the decision process, both internal and external consultants. Now, you have to decide where you lie, but we all can agree, I think, that it's far more people are involved now than there ever have been in the past. So what does that mean to us for a second? Well, if you look at the studies, there are 3 things that you really should be paying attention to that as a leader myself, I get very nervous. One is that only 24% of the sellers are leading the buyer-seller dance. Leading the buyer-seller dance. Now think about that for a minute. That used to be in the 80s and 90s a couple of years ago, but now only 24% of the sellers are saying, yeah, I'm leading the dance. And let's even believe them for a second. That's way too low, way too low. But it makes sense, right? Because you see, all right, well, 65% of the buyers are saying they're leading the dance. Well, if you go backwards, that kind of makes sense because they've got so many different players with different agendas. They want to kind of move forward to figure it out. They've got a lot of expertise internally. They've got a lot of consultants. They've got a lot of suppliers that they were working with in the past that are whispering in their ear, pick me, pick me, pick me. So it's not that far out of realm. Like, hey, that's the number. Okay, well, guess what? The worst number is that 68% of the buyers are engaging us at the end of the process, if at all. Now, as a seller, you may say, isn't that the greatest thing? I don't have to qualify. Buyers are getting us involved at the end of the process. This is the greatest thing of all time. But is it? Is it? It's kind of like my kids, Googling, right? PhDs. Are they right all the time? I don't think so. So what we have to do is to understand the numbers and adjust accordingly. Like, how do I involve a buyer? How do I engage a buyer that's almost 3/4 of the way through the process without upsetting them? And how do I do that? But there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of moving parts out there. Ultimately, I do believe because of the complex buyer journey, because of the sales landscape, we just need a new breed of salespeople. That doesn't mean what we're doing is wrong. That doesn't mean that we should get rid of all the sales. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is what used to work in the past isn't going to work in the future. We have to up our game. We have to do things differently in order to survive and thrive in the future. So one of the things that's out there we've got to talk about is the buyer journey. The buyer journey is changing all the time. Now, this picture that you see on your screen, that could last a day, could be a month, could be a year. So the company dictates the speed by which they go through this process, but it does happen, right? So I don't care what study you're looking for. They all come and say there is a buyer journey. We have to pay attention to that. That's not new news, but that's always changing because of that complexity that we talked about. So what are the buying stages? Well, engagement. So I've got a problem. So let's start talking about it. Hey, do you have a problem over in that department? Hey, what's going on? What do you see the issue is? So they start talking, right? They're engaging each other in what's the issue? What's the impact of this issue? What are we going to do about this issue? We even talk to people that used to work here or I respect outside of the company. So now I'm in just like, hey, what's the issue? Do you see it too? Then we go into consideration. Consideration is when we're moving past the, yeah, I think we all kind of agree we got an issue to like, what are our options? What are our options? Should we do it internally, fix it like we always do? Should we do a hybrid, get people to come in and do a little of it and we can pick up the heavy lifting? Do we bring people in and do a ton of free consulting and then take what they say and do it on our own? Do we go out and search? And if so, like who do we search? Right? Again, if you go back to that map with all the people, everybody's got a favorite partner. So now here comes a lot of people with a lot of opinions, right? So they're in that consideration phase. Like, what are we doing? Now we move to decision. Let's make some decisions. Are we going outside? Are we going inside? What are we spending here? Hey, how are we going to pick our partners, right? Who's in charge internally of running this process? All that stuff. And let's pick the 2 or 3 that are going to come in and do the dog and pony shows. And then how are we doing that? So all that's in the decision. And ultimately, it's going to be, we have made a decision, right? So there's a lot of mini decisions up to the point, but then it's, okay, we've picked our partner, hopefully you. Then we move to advocacy. Advocacy is they're raving fans. They want to buy more stuff. They're giving you referrals. They're awesome testimonials. You know, that's just a symbiotic relationship. And we all want to get there, right? So that's our process. Now, of course, our selling motions and our marketing, our messaging should reflect where they are in that process. Oftentimes it's a disconnect and that upsets our buyers, right? They're over here thinking they're in decision when you're over here doing, you know, how was your weekend? You're over here in the rapport stage. And it's upsetting to those who are waiting for, what's your magic sauce? Tell me how to fix my problem. So I think you have to trust, but verify when buyers tell you that they're at a certain stage. And by the way, no one's going to come to you and say, I'm in stage 3 right now. I'm in the decision phase. Just want to let you know that. They don't say it that way, right? But they do say, hey, we do know the issue. We do this, we do that, and here's where we are. Now, you got to trust but verify. You got to trust but verify. Now, one of the things that I love to do when people call for the very first time, I'll say things like, hey, thanks for reaching out. You know, based on my experience, I always find there's like, most organizations are in 1 or 2 spots. One is you've identified the issue, right? You've done a business case, you validated it internally. You probably even have the impact that it's causing the organization to live or not live with this issue. And right now you're just trying to find the best partner to help solve that problem. On the flip side, there's a ton of organizations, the majority call and say, look, we know there's an issue. We're not 100% sure we've identified the whole thing, but we're looking for expertise to help us better identify what the issue is and what we need to do to solve it. So then we can go and find the best partner. Where are you? Now, the Sandler A/B choice thing is awesome, but I want them to tell me, and regardless of what they tell me, I'm still going to go backwards in time a little bit, because my next move is if somebody says, hey, we know the issue, we're looking for a partner, my next line, all the thing, for those who know me, you know I'm a talk track guy, you know, is always going to sound something like, that's awesome. Can I make a suggestion? Can I step back for a couple seconds, ask you a couple questions so I can better get caught up to where you are and what you know, so therefore I can make the best recommendation possible to solve your issue? And they'll always give you permission. No one ever says, nope, don't ask me anything. Just tell me what you think without knowing. Just go into it blindly. They don't do that. So I'm asking permission to slow it down, and we do. Here's the other thing that pops. Look, you got to expand. When people come to you and they say, this is my problem, of course you want to say, absolutely. But we want to make sure, is there anything else? I want to expand the conversation. So let's use my world as an example. You come to me and say, I've got a low close rate. Now I could say, low close rate, here's how we solve that problem. And I just deal with that particular pain issue, assuming, by the way, if you're not Sandler trained, you're going to go right into throwing up. I get it. But Sandler people, we're going to go down a pain funnel to figure out if that's it. But we have to widen that because, hey, what's causing low close rates? Is it the fact that we have no deal coaching? Is it the fact that we have no qualification stage? I mean, what is it? And then what's the impact of that, right? Is it the fact that maybe your service, the people who are actually implementing what you sold, are not available because they didn't expect it to close this month? That's always a huge problem when you have implementers are like, hey, I've been waiting 2 months for that deal to close. I've got to put these people on another project. Or they're sitting on the beach waiting for your deal to close for months. I mean, some people are just waiting for engagements that work for you. They've been there so long, they've got running water and electricity, right? So this is hot or cold. So that's an issue. Or you discount to get deals. Either way, when I open up the conversation as a seller, I'm helping connect dots for that buyer. I'm establishing credibility. I'm also better understanding the issue, which you're going to find out is super important to them. And I can give them a better solution to their problem versus just dealing with the problem. Sandler always had a rule. The problem the prospect brings you is never the real problem, right? It's never the real problem. And I'm going to agree it could be the problem, but I want to expand that conversation to see what else is the issue. Because what you don't want to do as an organization is to start dealing with the symptom, solve the symptom, but not the real problem. And you and I both know, if you've been selling for a while, lots of organizations come to you with what they think the issue is, and it's not really the issue. What they're facing is the result of something else happening further upstream. So I believe one of the things we have to do is to start to simplify the sales process, simplify this for our buyers. And so Jody Williamson at our last summit, and you've heard both Emily and Carrie talking about our summit, which by the way is in early April. So it's April 2nd and 3rd of this year down in Florida. We've got over 1,000 people coming. It's a rock'em sock'em couple of days. He did a great presentation saying that, hey, when closing deals, 3 out of 10 get closed if you're giving information. Now think about that if you have a team sales situation, which I'm going to define as other people other than yourself involved in the selling process, right? So it's just not you as a salesperson. So if I'm just giving information, whether it's sending it to them, right, handing them stuff, 3 out of 10. If I'm just telling, hey, tell me a little bit about what you do. Hey, tell me how you would solve this, blah, 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 blah. I'm sure it's awesome. I'm sure they're genius attacks. The problem is I can't absorb as a buyer. And the problem is that you may be talking to one persona with all those people, that's 6 to 18 different buyers. So maybe you're connecting with 1 or 2, but the other ones are like, yawners, right? You're not talking about anything I care about. So that's only a 5 out of 10. But the first 2 are really just kind of different versions of throw up and, show up and throw up, right? Sense making, moving forward, simplifiers, connecting the dots, helping all of those buyers understand what the global issue is, you understanding what their individual pain points are, and then connecting all of the dots of what you do to that whole picture. That's the magic. And that's what Jody shared with us. Because if you look at, again, the picture, you've got a lot of different people with different perspective, different expertise levels, right? Trying to figure out how to make a good decision. So simplifying, connecting the dots is important. The bottom line is that when we have team buying, which is not going away, you need team selling. They're hunting in packs. We've got to sell in packs. It's just the fact. Now we can say, well, again, what is team selling? I think team selling is defined as anyone other than you in the process. That may not be exactly at the same time. Like I might not be showing up with all these people in blue, but most organizations have the people that are in blue as part of their sales process, their sales team. They got BDRs, they have AEs, they've got sales managers, right? They have even owners and leaders. Look, as a CN owner, if you came out of the sales side of the business, you're going to be saying to yourself more times than not, I know more about this stuff than anyone. Bring me on an account. Okay, well, that's team selling, right? How about sales engineer, customer success, account managers, outside partners, channel partners, right? Lots of different people. The bottom line here is what I have found is, just before we move on, these groups don't talk to each other. So my son's a BDR. He does copious notes. This is the pain points. Here's our upfront contract. Here's what they expect on the next call, blah, blah, blah. Gives it to the AE. AEs never look at it. They just start from scratch again as if they never had a conversation with the BDR. Do you know how frustrating that is to a buyer? I mean, it's terrible. And they say that. They come out and say it. They're so disgusted. So the problem is we have to make sure that we've got awesome baton handoffs here, right? Awesome handoffs from one group to another. So we're leveraging where they left off, not starting from scratch. But let's talk about a salesperson selling to this group of buyers out there now. Why do salespeople try to get this sales process done on their own? I mean, it's archaic. Why do we do that? We've got so much expertise internally. Well, based on my experience, here's a couple reasons why. First, lack of trust. Salespeople do not trust others in their company to do the right thing in front of their prospects. So you'll hear things like, hey, it took me 6 months to get this meeting. It took you 6.5 minutes to blow it up, right? Or, hey, I'm paid on commission. If I'm going down, baby, I'm going down on my own mistake. I don't need you to mess up this deal. Or it could even be lack of self-awareness. They may just think that they're so competent, in every single aspect of the buyer network that nobody could do it better. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but salespeople do have egos, right? So it's possible, right? Yep, I know everything. So you know who those are. But it's also just, hey, maybe I just don't know better. But here's what I do know. If you look at my buyers up top, and you can pick the titles, and there's often more times than there's 4. The salesperson down below, he knows a little about a lot of things that have to do with their pain points and the product. Those people up top, the buyers, I have a sales engineer here. I've got very specific knowledge base, right? They know a lot about a very narrow field. You can't compete from an expertise perspective with a person who knows an awful lot about a little when you know a little about a lot. Just doesn't work. But think about the mistakes that we're making here. Look, most of the buyers want 2 things from you: that you are an industry expert, right? Trusted advisor, and you understand their business problems. Now think about that for a second. Is that actually possible when you've got 4, 8, 10, 12, 16 buyers? Are you really going to understand the business issues from their perspective with each one of those people? You can't do it. Not to the level of what they want. Because the ultimate thing is, hey, 73% of them say I'm getting a transactional type deal. So that's a problem, right? I want expertise. I want industry knowledge, but yet all I'm getting is transactional for that very reason, because salespeople are going it on their own, or they're just bringing one person. When we're team selling here at Sandler, there's like 4 or 5 people, and they're very specific based on what they do in the organization. Here's the analytics person. Here's the assessment person. Here's this person. Here's that person. When they talk shop, I have no idea what they're saying, but they do. And that's the only important thing. So when you do have a buyer network, you have to map it. What does that mean? You should be mapping the buyers and the sellers based on their DISC profiles, based on their behavioral profiles, right? So I want to make sure if my buyer's analytical, that I have an analytical person talking to them, not somebody that talks at 60,000 feet in generalities and never gets to the specifics, because my buyer, who's very detail-oriented, would say, they don't know what they're talking about. They're not even giving me one shred of detail. They don't know what they're doing. And vice versa, though. Listen, if the buyer's big picture and you've got a very analytical salesperson or a partner there, they're killing them with the detail. So we have to match that. We have to match expertise. If I got a sales engineer, I want somebody. If I have an assessment expert on my end, I want an assessment on their end. I want an assessment expert on my end. So expertise and skill level, experience level. You have a 35-year veteran that's a buyer, and I put a college grad coming right out of it. And again, let's assume it was a sales engineer into that example. That's a disconnect. So we want as close as possible. I mean, we even map them based on, hey, they used to both work at Oracle. They both went to XYZ University. As much as you can have that continuity, the better off you are. So we want to get that. We want to make sure that it's collaborative. So our team, our selling team, has to be collaborative, has to be talking. You'd be shocked on how our selling team isn't really communicating along the way. So here's some general rules. First of all, salespeople, you run this account. You run this account, right? You are in charge. It is your deal. We're going to come to you if you mess it up, and we're going to praise you if you win it. Take control. Don't say, oh, I had nothing to do with it. Always run a pre-call planner. Never do a team sell without a pre-call plan. You should tell your partners, this is what's going to be asked of you, I believe. What is your answer, by the way? I listen to it. You got 5 minutes. That's your time block. You cannot talk for 45 minutes on this topic. You got 5 minutes. Get it into that time block. So here are the questions that I want you to ask. You should always tell your partners what you want to ask. If I'm in sales mode, as an example, and you're not answering, let's say, the start date question, I want my assessment person to ask. Because when I ask it as a salesperson, they hear Jaws music. Here comes the qualification question. But if my assessment person says, hey, look, I think one of the most important things for me is, hypothetically, whether it's us or anyone else, when do you plan on starting? Because I've got a lot of stuff that I've got to do behind the scenes to match that date. If you had to pick, what would it be? Oh, January 1st. Why January 1st? Well, we have a big kickoff meeting, blah, blah, blah. That's more information that I had no idea. So that's there. So a lot of that stuff has to happen. But we also want to leverage them. Leverage our team members. What's that mean? Group. Again, I've already talked about having them ask questions. I love pre-calls to the meeting. So I'll use my assessment person. If I know that we're talking to somebody on their side that's an assessment person, I want that person to call and just say, hi, I'm Mary Smith over at Sandler. I know we're going to be talking next week about X, Y, and Z. Thought I'd reach out, introduce myself so you could put a face to the voice when we're there next week. But I also had a couple questions that I'd like to ask so I can better prepare to best utilize your time. Now they're engaging. They're asking all the questions. By the way, those are the questions that I wanted them to ask in my pre-call planner. How about afterwards? We have V8 moments. Oh, I should have asked. Have your partners call after the call as well. Hey, I didn't get a chance to ask this during the call. We didn't have enough time. Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions so I can then send you the documentation that you've asked for? Those are awesome moves. But what I do find is that when you have team members and you've leveraged them properly, look, it builds credibility. It builds credibility. It shows depth, right? You're going to find out a ton of dynamics because the buyers aren't going to share with you all the information, but somebody on the buying team will. It doesn't really matter. Listen, the CEO's friend does this too. This is a waste of my time. I don't even know why we're going through this process. You would be amazed at what they just plug, and you had no idea. So that's really, really important. But leverage them, leverage them, leverage them. Because if we're not, then we're just pushing on our own, and that's a big mistake. I think the bottom line is that team buying requires team selling. And we spend so much time as salespeople with, how do I start the call? How do I do this? How do I do that? It's really spending a lot of time on those who may not sell every single day that you could leverage properly. It's becoming more and more complex. It's becoming harder for them to simplify. Our team has to do that. And when you have somebody that has not done a pre-call planner, your partner's trying to show expertise, trying to show credibility. But if there's 4 or 5 other buyers on that call, they could be confusing them. And when you become experts at team selling in today's environment, you're going to go and get more than your fair share of business. And I think ultimately that's our goal, is how to get more than our fair share. And if you do pay attention to the buyer journey and the sales motion that applies there and your messaging, then you will be on track. Hey, look, again, thanks for all the clients out there putting your trust in us. Looking forward to seeing you at the summit in April. And until then, good selling.